The courtroom was suffocatingly silent, the air pressed down like a storm about to break. The echo of the gavel struck with a hollow weight, announcing a verdict that shattered trust. Emma Hayes gripped the wooden bench, her hands trembling, her breath uneven. She whispered, "This cannot be true." Across the aisle, Daniel Cole stood motionless, his face unreadable, though the faint twitch at his jaw betrayed a storm beneath. The judge's words carved through the air, each syllable like a knife. In the gallery, whispers rippled, strangers leaning in as if they too had been betrayed. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, as though the sky mirrored the collapse inside. Emma felt the weight of years of loyalty dissolving into ash. She thought of promises sworn in dark nights, of a protector who had once vowed to shield her. Daniel finally turned, his voice low. "I never wanted it to come to this." His words cut deeper than any ruling. A phone buzzed faintly in the back, breaking the stillness with an ominous chime, as if fate itself had called to remind them their story was only beginning. Emma's heart clenched, knowing this was not an end, but the opening blow of something darker. Outside the courthouse, Emma stood under the awning, the rain tracing chaotic paths along the stone steps. Her chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, each breath colder than the one before. She whispered, "How could he do this?" But the sound was lost to the storm. The verdict echoed still, replaying like a curse. Cars rushed by, headlights streaking pale light across her damp face. A stranger brushed past, their umbrella nearly striking her shoulder, but she barely noticed. Memories of Daniel's promises rose like ghosts, each one now sharpened into betrayal. She stared at her reflection in a puddle, distorted by ripples, as though the person she once was had already dissolved. The storm pressed on, relentless, as if to remind her the world did not pause for shattered hearts. Emma clenched her jaw, but her eyes betrayed the depth of her fracture. "This is not over," she murmured, voice steadying, even as thunder drowned it. Emma found herself back inside her apartment, the silence oppressive. The muted ticking of a wall clock felt like an accusation. She dropped her soaked coat onto a chair and slumped by the window. Rain streaked the glass, mirroring the confusion in her chest. She whispered, "Daniel's name," almost as if it could summon a reason. Shadows stretched across the small room, the kind that seemed to breathe with her doubt. On the table sat an untouched cup of coffee from that morning, now cold, as though mocking her habit of leaving things unfinished. She touched the sealed envelope lying on the shelf, the one she never dared to open. The weight of it pressed against her hand, reminding her of wounds too deep to name. She whispered, "Not yet," and withdrew her fingers, afraid of what the letter might take from her. Her reflection in the darkened window stared back with unfamiliar eyes, a stranger bound in grief and fear. The knock at her door startled her, sharp against the hush of her apartment. She hesitated, then opened it to reveal Alex Reed, the reluctant fire starter, his eyes fierce despite his youth. He muttered, "You don't know the half of it." His words struck like sparks in the gloom. Alex stepped inside, shaking rain from his jacket, restless energy spilling into the stillness. Emma studied him, sensing both defiance and desperation. He pulled a crumpled notebook from his bag and tossed it on the table. "They lied to you," he said, his voice steady but edged with fear. Emma frowned, her fingers brushing the pages, the weight of his claim settling deep. The room seemed to shrink around them, shadows coiling as secrets pressed closer. The storm outside pounded harder, as though the world itself demanded she listen. She whispered, "Show me." Emma turned the notebook's pages, her hands trembling. Sketches, scraps of notes, and fragments of conversations spilled across the paper. Alex said, "Daniel isn't who you think he is." His words tightened the knot in her chest. She traced a crude drawing of a courtroom, with dark shadows looming behind the bench. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Alex's voice dropped. "Because it's connected to the one you lost." The words froze her breath. She glanced toward the sealed letter, the one she could never open, and felt the ground tilt. Memories clawed up, laughter cut short, a life fractured, promises broken. The storm outside roared, and in its fury, she heard the echo of betrayal stretching years deep. Emma whispered, "If you're wrong, this destroys me. If you're right," her voice trailed, as though finishing the thought might break her entirely. Emma sat alone at dawn, her apartment filled with gray light that carried no warmth. Her reflection in the window was pale, broken, yet alive. She whispered, "Why am I still here?" The storm had passed but left the streets soaked and heavy. Her chest ached with a weight that could not be shaken. She pressed her forehead against the glass, the coolness steadying her shaking breath. The memory of those she lost clawed at her, a grief that had not lessened with time. Her coffee sat unfinished again, a silent witness to her restless nights. Emma muttered, "I survived, but at what cost?" The air hummed with silence, pressing as heavily as the verdict still echoing in her bones. A letter, sealed for years, stared back from the shelf, daring her to face what she feared most. She closed her eyes, whispering, "I'm not ready," though the world would not wait for her consent. The knock came soft, but Emma's pulse jumped. She opened the door to Grace Miller, the warm comforter, her presence radiating calm even in the storm's aftermath. Grace offered a gentle smile and a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You don't have to go through this alone," she said softly. Emma almost collapsed into her warmth, yet something in Grace's eyes flickered too knowingly. They sat together in the small kitchen, the quiet filled with the smell of fresh tea. Grace leaned in, voice a balm, "You've carried too much for too long." Emma's lips trembled, the words refusing to come. Grace reached across, her fingers brushing Emma's hand, a touch both tender and binding. "Trust me," she whispered. Emma nodded faintly, though her chest screamed doubt. In that moment, comfort felt like a lifeline, though it hid its price. The door slammed open. Alex Reed barged in with restless energy, his notebook clutched tightly. "You're both ignoring the truth," he snapped. Emma flinched at the force of his tone. Grace frowned, but her calm held. "Alex, slow down." He threw the notebook onto the table, pages flipping open to chaotic sketches and notes. His voice cut sharp, "You're being lied to." Emma's stomach knotted, the fear she carried finding shape in his words. Grace leaned forward, voice smooth but firm, "You're scaring her." Alex shot back, "Good. She needs to be scared. That's the only way she'll see." The storm in his eyes burned brighter than the fading rain outside. Emma whispered, "Alex, what do you mean?" His silence lingered long enough to turn the room colder, and then he said, "Daniel isn't innocent. He never was." Later that day, Marcus Hale, the steady anchor, arrived unannounced. He stood in the doorway, his solid frame blocking the light behind him. "I heard what happened," he said simply. Emma felt a rare comfort in his presence. He always carried a steadiness that made chaos quiet. Marcus stepped inside, placing a paper bag with food on the counter. "You need to eat," he said gently, voice calm but firm. Grace watched silently, her eyes unreadable. Emma forced a small smile, though her hands still shook. "I don't know who to believe anymore," she admitted. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Then trust me," he said. The words felt heavy, though meant to soothe. Emma wanted to trust, but suspicion was beginning to thread into every word spoken around her. That night, when the apartment grew quiet, Emma was drawn again to the sealed letter resting on the shelf. Her hand hovered above it, heart pounding. Grace's words still rang in her ears, Alex's warnings, Marcus's calm assurances. All clashed together like storm winds. She whispered, "What truth am I hiding from myself?" Her fingers touched the envelope, edges worn, the weight unbearable. Faint memory stirred, laughter of someone lost, a pen tapping against paper, a voice she would never hear again. Emma's chest heaved, her tears silent as they fell onto the letter's surface. She pulled her hand back, whispering, "Not yet," the same words she had always used. The world beyond her window carried on, indifferent, but inside her heart the silence felt like a scream. The courthouse basement smelled of damp stone and old secrets. Emma walked carefully, her footsteps echoing in the narrow hall. Alex trailed behind, flashlight shaking in his restless hand. "It should be here," he muttered, urgency sharp in his voice. She felt the chill of something hidden pressing closer with each step. They stopped before a locked cabinet, its surface scarred and rusted. Emma whispered, "Why would evidence be left here?" Alex shoved the beam of light onto a file, stamped with Daniel's name. Her heart seized. Dust swirled in the stale air as she reached for it, fingers trembling. The silence pressed heavier, as if walls themselves demanded silence for the sins they kept. Alex leaned closer, his eyes burning. "Now you'll see." Emma pulled the folder free, the paper frayed with time, and felt her chest collapse beneath its weight. Grace arrived at Emma's apartment that evening, her warmth filling the silence. She brewed tea without asking, her movements graceful and sure. Emma sat rigid, the folder spread open on the table. "Tell me this isn't true," Emma whispered, voice fraying. Grace placed the steaming cup before her, eyes steady. "Not everything is what it seems." Emma's hand trembled as she slid the papers across, demanding a response. Grace read slowly, her calm unmoved. "Evidence disappears all the time," she murmured, almost too softly. Emma blinked, heart twisting. Why was Grace not surprised? The comfort she offered felt suddenly heavy, like chains hidden in silk. Grace reached across the table, her touch light. "You're safe with me." But Emma wondered, safe from whom? The storm had quieted outside, but Alex's anger only grew. He stood by the window, notebook clutched, his voice sharp. "She knows more than she admits," he said, eyes darting toward Grace's empty chair. Emma pressed her palms against her temples, the noise inside her head louder than his words. "I don't know who to trust anymore," she breathed. Alex turned, his face pale but fierce. "Then don't trust anyone." The boy's defiance carried a loneliness Emma could feel like a knife. He paced the room, every movement restless, sketching shapes in air with his free hand. Emma whispered, "I need the truth, not warnings." Alex stopped, shoulders slumping, and said quietly, "The truth will hurt worse than lies." His eyes carried a weight too heavy for someone so young. Marcus appeared late, stepping into Emma's apartment with his steady calm. His presence filled the room, grounding yet unsettling in its timing. "I heard you found something," he said, voice low. Emma studied his face, searching for cracks, but found none. Alex stood tense, glaring, his notebook half raised like a shield. Marcus dropped his coat on a chair, folded his arms, and waited. "Why are you here, Marcus?" Emma asked. His answer was patient, "To keep you safe." The words landed heavy, echoing Grace's earlier claim, binding Emma in further doubt. Marcus leaned against the counter, casual but deliberate. "You can't carry this alone," he said firmly. Alex muttered, "Or maybe you don't want her to carry it at all." Silence thickened, the storm replaced by unease that felt sharper than thunder. The night deepened, and with it came a presence unlike the others. Eleanor Price, the velvet blade, entered with a grace that silenced the room. Her coat was immaculate, her eyes sharp, her poise unshaken. Emma froze, her chest hollowing at the sight. "You've been asking questions," Eleanor said softly, yet her voice carried weight. Alex stiffened, shrinking back though his glare held. Marcus's expression faltered just briefly before steadying. Eleanor moved like a shadow across the floor, her hand brushing the sealed envelope on the shelf. "Some truths aren't yours to hold," she whispered. Emma's heart pounded, the room tightening as though the walls leaned closer. Grace's absence now felt calculated. Emma whispered, "Why are you here?" Eleanor's lips curved slightly, "To remind you that every answer has a cost." The folder lay open on the table, its contents spread like open wounds. Emma stared at the grainy photograph of Daniel, standing beside Eleanor, years earlier, their faces set in grim unity. Her heart recoiled. Alex whispered, "He was always part of it." Emma's throat tightened, denial clawing at her chest. "No, this has to be a mistake," she insisted, though her voice cracked. Marcus shifted, his gaze heavy on the page, but he said nothing. The silence screamed louder than words. Grace's earlier calm now echoed as warning rather than comfort. Emma pressed her palm flat against the photo, as though pressure could erase it. "He swore to protect me," she whispered, eyes burning. Alex leaned closer, voice sharp. "He protected the secret, not you." A truth buried too long had clawed its way to light, and Emma felt her world fracture. Emma's breaths came shallow as she flipped through more papers, each revealing deeper betrayal. Documents bore Daniel's name linked to hidden accounts and arrest records. Grace's words returned like daggers. "Not everything is what it seems." Emma whispered, "How could he betray us all?" Her voice cracked with grief. Marcus finally spoke, calm but heavy. "Sometimes the truth destroys more than it saves." Alex snapped back. "That's what liars say." His young voice cut through the air, defiant and raw. Emma felt trapped between their voices, her chest heaving, every memory of Daniel now poisoned. She pressed her hands against her temples, muttering, "I don't know what's real anymore." The papers rustled under the draft from the window, as if the past itself wanted to be heard. Alex slammed his notebook onto the table, pages spilling open to sketches of faces and places Emma did not recognize. His voice cracked with rage. "This is tied to the one you lost. Eleanor knew them." Emma's breath caught, her hand frozen above the sealed letter. She stared at Alex, wide-eyed. "You can't know that." His voice softened but did not waver. "I do. I saw the same symbol years ago." Marcus stiffened, his jaw tightening at the claim. Emma's chest pounded, the memory of laughter and a pen tapping echoing in her head. The lingering memory's shadow now took form, linking past pain with the betrayal in front of her. She whispered, "All this time, it was connected." Her voice trembled, her heart refusing to accept but unable to deny. The room felt smaller, as though walls themselves leaned closer to hear the truth. Marcus moved forward, his voice steady but threaded with something darker. "You don't understand what you're digging into," he said firmly. Alex glared, defiance sharp. "Then, explain it," he demanded. Emma's heart thudded painfully as she watched Marcus's calm crack just slightly, his eyes clouded with conflict. "I've made choices," he admitted quietly, "for the greater good." Emma's pulse raced. "What choices?" she pressed. His silence burned louder than confession. Alex spat the words. Emma feared, "He's protecting Daniel." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. Emma staggered back, her hand gripping the chair for balance. Trust that once grounded her now shifted like sand beneath her feet. Marcus's eyes softened, almost pleading, but his silence gave him away. The air chilled as Eleanor stepped forward, her composure unbroken. She brushed her hand along the sealed envelope, pausing, as though savoring its weight. Emma's stomach twisted, fear tightening in her chest. "So much noise for answers you're not ready to hold," Eleanor said smoothly. Alex trembled but stood his ground. "You knew them, didn't you?" Eleanor's eyes lingered, sharp and unyielding. "I've always known," she whispered. Marcus looked away, shame flickering in his calm mask. Emma stepped forward, voice trembling. "Why did you let me believe he was my guardian?" Eleanor's lips curved faintly. "Because you needed hope more than truth." The words cut through Emma's core, unmasking everything she thought was hers. The silence after was worse than thunder, for it carried the weight of every shattered truth. The courthouse thrummed with hushed dread as Emma stepped into the aisle. Daniel rose from the defense table, eyes shadowed, palms open like a plea. She said, "Tell me what you did." His mouth tightened, words trapped behind pride and fear. Eleanor watched from the back row, still as cut glass, her gaze a quiet command. Alex hovered near the door, clutching his notebook as if it were armor. Marcus stood between counsel tables, posture steady, voice low, "Not here." Emma shook her head, the years of trust turning to splinters in her throat. "Here," she said, every syllable a verdict of her own. Daniel exhaled, a tremor betraying the calm he wore like a mask. "I kept you alive," he said, but the sentence bled guilt. The judge entered, and the room straightened as one organism braced for impact. Emma did not sit. She whispered, "Alive is not the same as safe." In a stark witness room, silence pressed like a second door. Daniel sat opposite Emma, a fluorescent hum slicing the air. "You were my shield," she said, "and also the knife." He stared at the table, jaw set. "I signed a deal to protect you," he answered, words heavy with old bargains. Emma's breath hitched, anger and love cracking like ice. "Protect me from what you helped build," she said. He flinched, the truth grazing bone. "Eleanor owned the ground we stood on," he murmured. "I thought I could redirect the fire." Emma leaned in, the letters ghost between them. "You redirected it into me," she said. He lifted his eyes at last, aching and unguarded. "I chose the least ruin," he confessed. "You chose obedience," she replied, and the room felt smaller than a wound. The hearing reconvened with a hush that burned. Alex stepped up, shoulders squared, voice steady as he offered a drive. "Chain of custody is documented," he said, daring the room to breathe. Screens flickered to life, showing transfers, texts, and a symbol etched in ledger margins. Emma watched Daniel's face fold, a tide surrendering. Grace slipped in at the side, eyes soft, hands folded like a prayer-turned bargaining chip. Eleanor did not move. Marcus's gaze swept the exhibits, measuring exits rather than facts. Alex spoke again, quieter now. "You told me to be brave, so I am." The gallery leaned forward as a recording played, Daniel's voice naming dates and directives. He closed his eyes, the cost arriving at last. Emma whispered, "You could have told me." He answered, "I could have ruined you sooner." The final exhibit cracked the floor beneath them. A memo surfaced, signed by Marcus, authorizing the diversion that buried the first crime. Emma's breath vanished, as if the room had swallowed her name. Marcus lifted his chin, steady even as color left his face. "I did it to contain the damage," he said, voice quiet but iron. Alex spat. "You lit the fire and called it weather." Grace's eyes flashed with a sorrow that might have been shame. Emma stood slowly, the ache in her legs an oath. "You were the calm I trusted," she said. Marcus met her gaze, pleading without begging. "I spared lives," he answered. "I spared yours." "You spared the lie," she replied, and the gallery murmured like a distant storm. The judge hammered order, but the truth had already stood. Eleanor rose, elegant and unhurried, as if justice were an audience she curated. "You think truth ends this," she said, voice velvet over steel. The room tilted toward her gravity. "Truth is a door," Emma answered, "and we just turned the key." Eleanor's eyes held Emma like a still blade. "Keys break," she murmured. She moved toward the center, immaculate, a storm in silk. Daniel watched, a man unmasked and unfinished. Marcus inhaled, preparing an argument that died before birth. Alex stepped beside Emma, notebook down, hands open. "We do this now," he said. Emma's voice steadied into something new. "The letter stays sealed for me," she said, "but not for the record." The judge nodded once. Eleanor smiled without warmth, yet for the first time the smile did not command the room. The courthouse emptied, but Emma remained, the echo of footsteps fading into silence. She stood at the bench, palms flat against the cold wood, her chest heaving with unspent grief. Daniel's confession clung to the walls, his words burned into her marrow. "Alive is not the same as safe," she whispered again, louder this time as if daring the walls to argue. The sealed letter weighed like lead in her mind, begging to be opened, but she feared its truth more than the lies already unveiled. Alex lingered near the exit, restless, torn between hope and fear. Marcus stood stiff at the back, his eyes avoiding hers, guilt carved into his silence. Eleanor's shadow had left, but her voice lingered like smoke. Emma closed her eyes, choosing whether vengeance or mercy would shape her next step. Grace found Emma later in the rain, waiting beneath the courthouse steps. She held an umbrella, her presence warm yet heavy with unspoken truths. "Come with me," she urged gently. Emma's eyes were hollow, her voice sharp. You knew, she accused, trembling with anger. Grace's lips pressed into a thin line, her hand reaching but not touching. I only wanted to spare you, she whispered. The storm pounded around them, raindrops stinging skin and soaking clothes. Emma turned away, her breath ragged. You gave me comfort, but not truth. Grace's eyes glistened, as if carrying her own ghosts. The umbrella tilted, rain splashing onto them both, a shared penance under the storm. Emma stepped into the downpour, choosing pain over soft lies. Back in the apartment, Alex paced like a caged flame, his voice sharp. You have to act now, Emma, or this never ends. She sat hunched on the couch, clutching the sealed envelope, her knuckles white. You think vengeance fixes everything? She asked, voice raw. Alex stopped, his face fierce, but behind it a hunger to be heard. It fixes nothing, he admitted, but it shows them you won't kneel. Emma looked at him, seeing the boy beneath the rage, desperate for justice in a world that ignored him. The storm outside eased into steady rain, each drop tapping like a reminder. Emma whispered, I'm so tired of carrying this alone. Alex lowered his notebook and sat beside her, silent for once, his presence louder than words. Marcus arrived, uninvited, his frame filling the doorway. He looked older than his years, his steadiness cracked. I came to face you, he said quietly. Emma rose, her eyes sharp, the envelope still in her hand. You face me with what? She asked. His voice wavered for the first time. With the cost of my choices. Alex's fists clenched at his side, ready to strike, but Emma raised a hand, stilling him. Marcus stepped forward, his gaze unflinching. I chose loyalty to an order, not to people. That was my betrayal. Emma's breath trembled, pain flashing into anger. And you expect forgiveness? She asked. Marcus lowered his head, silent. The room brimmed with the truth, raw and unyielding, too heavy for words to carry further. Eleanor's presence returned without warning, as if she stepped out of the storm itself. She stood in the doorway, calm and precise, her gaze cutting through the tension. You think confession equals freedom, she said, her voice silk with steel. Emma turned to face her, envelope still clutched tight. No, Emma answered firmly. It equals ending your hold. Eleanor smiled faintly, eyes unwavering. Power doesn't end with truth, it bends it. Alex stepped closer to Emma, his glare defiant. Marcus' shoulders sagged, a man undone. The storm rattled the window, thunder rolling like judgment. Emma lifted the envelope at last, voice steady. Then let's see how truth bends when light touches it. The room froze, the moment a blade edge between justice and ruin. The courthouse steps were quiet now, slick with rain that glistened under street lamps. Emma stood alone, the sealed letter still heavy in her hand. She whispered, Justice isn't clean, it never was. Her breath fogged the night air, fragile but unbroken. Alex lingered nearby, watching her with the caution of someone who knew wounds never truly closed. Marcus had already vanished into the shadows, his silence leaving more scars than words. Eleanor's absence felt louder than her presence, as if she still lingered in the cracks of every lie. Emma closed her eyes, pressing the letter against her chest, unsure if opening it would heal or shatter. For the first time, she chose not to run. Emma returned to her apartment, silence wrapping her like a second skin. She set the envelope on the table, staring at it under the soft glow of a single lamp. Grace appeared at the door, her face drawn, carrying both guilt and sorrow. You'll hate me if I stay, and hate me if I leave, she said softly. Emma did not answer, her eyes locked on the letter as if it were breathing. Grace stepped closer, her voice trembling. I never wanted to wound you, only to keep you standing. Emma finally met her gaze, her voice raw. Then you should have let me fall on my own terms. The silence after was heavier than any storm. The night pressed on, and Alex lingered by the window, sketching shapes into the condensation with his finger. He whispered, You're stronger than them. Emma sat behind him, her voice steady but hollow. Strength doesn't heal. He turned, his eyes carrying defiance and sorrow. But it keeps you alive long enough to choose, he said. Emma studied him, a boy forced into truths too heavy. She whispered, "You shouldn't have carried this." Alex shrugged, restless. "I wanted someone to finally see me." Their silence became an unspoken bond, forged from scars and fractures, fragile but real. Emma's hand hovered over the envelope, the weight of years trembling in her fingers. The memory of the lingering memory filled the room like a haunting melody. She could almost hear the pen tapping, the soft hum that once anchored her. Tears welled, but she did not move away this time. Alex's voice whispered, "You don't have to open it." She nodded faintly, her breath shaking. "But I need to know if my grief was real or rewritten," she said. The moment stretched, the room narrowing to the paper, and the silence around it. The past and present bled together, daring her to break. She did not open the envelope. "Instead," Emma whispered, "some truths aren't meant to be freed." She rose, placing it back on the shelf where it had always been, but this time with intention, not fear. The storm outside had finally passed, leaving the night eerily still. Alex asked quietly, "So what now?" Emma's gaze hardened, her voice calm. "Now I live with the silence." In the corner, shadows deepened as if Eleanor still watched, her influence never truly gone. Emma stepped toward the window, staring at the horizon that hid tomorrow. Her final whisper lingered in the room, chilling and unresolved. "Justice isn't what ends us, it's what haunts us."